Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling a major self-improvement challenge that I think almost everyone hits eventually. How exactly do you pursue personal growth when life feels messy, when your energy is chronically low, and your general state is just drained?
Yeah, it's such an essential question, isn't it? When reality really sets in, we've all sort of absorbed this high-octane version of self-improvement.
Right.
The person who maximizes every single minute, wakes up at 5 a.m., pushes relentlessly towards some crystal-clear goal. But that model, it requires a full tank of ambition, of mental fuel.
And what happens when you're just not that person anymore? Or maybe you never were, but now complexity has really suppressed your desire to even try.
Exactly. Maybe you're navigating increased caregiving responsibilities, or perhaps your work role has become more demanding, but somehow less interesting. Life happens.
Yeah, life happens. And that dynamic, I think, is the central conflict we really need to get into today. We're not looking for a script on how to, hack yourself back to full gas energy.
No, that's not the goal here.
Our mission today is really to extract 4 specific alternative models for being growth-oriented. Methods that allow growth to emerge from life's inherent messiness and low energy.
Instead of seeing all that, the actual texture of your chaotic life as just an obstacle you have to constantly overcome.
Precisely.
Because when you recognize that the old energetic self, the one who maybe could finish a master's degree while holding down a full-time job, when you realize that self feels distant,
Yeah.
well, the tools designed for that really ambitious person, they just don't work now. You can't just apply more pressure, more force.
You need a different blueprint, something for self-development that actually honors your current capacity.
Yes. A different blueprint entirely.
Okay, so when you're feeling kind of beaten down, the typical advice often seems to be, impose more structure, more rigidity, more consistency.
Right, just stick to the plan.
But isn't rigidity sometimes the only thing that works when we lack that internal motivation? How do we trust ourselves enough to be flexible without just abandoning the task completely?
That's the critical pivot point, isn't it? Rigidity in self-improvement, sticking to routines no matter what, it's often praised as the ultimate strength.
Sure, it sounds strong.
But it can actually be a vulnerability. It means a person might only know how to approach growth at full gas. They depend on that external rigidity because maybe they haven't developed those more subtle, more responsive mental gears.
Okay, so we need to replace that forced adherence, that rigidity, with something we're calling smart flexibility. Let's unpack that. What does it actually look like in practice?
Smart flexibility, it's about succeeding by adjusting intelligently based on your current reality, rather than just forcing yourself to push through internal or external barriers that you genuinely don't have the capacity for right now.
It's not about giving up then.
No, not at all. It's about being a responsive coach to yourself rather than, say, a demanding drill sergeant.
Okay, but that requires deep self-trust. And ironically, that's often the first thing that evaporates when you feel overwhelmed.
It absolutely does. It requires skills beyond just simple brute force grit. Consider someone who has a goal to maintain their physical health.
Okay.
In the high-energy rigid model, if they plan 3 strength training sessions, they feel they must push for heavier weights or more reps every single time. Growth, growth, growth.
Right, always pushing.
Smart flexibility, though, means checking their emotional and mental capacity on, say, Tuesday morning. If they know they're running on fumes because maybe a parent had a bad night or work was draining, they adjust that strength session. They shift the aim from growth pushing for heavier weights to aiming purely for maintenance in that specific week, just showing up and doing something.
So they still show up. They still perform the habit, but they calibrate the intensity, like you said, to their emotional fuel gauge.
Precisely.
That feels like it makes the habit sustainable even when reserves are low, and maybe prevents that all-or-nothing crash where you just give up entirely.
Exactly right. It's the difference between doing maybe a 20-minute capacity-adjusted routine that keeps the habit alive versus skipping the session entirely because you can't hit your personal best.
Yeah.
Smart flexibility prevents that guilt spiral that so often derails consistency.
Okay, that makes sense. That teaches us how to adjust our own self-imposed goals. But what happens when life throws an unexpected curveball, something you didn't even budget for?
Yeah.
That brings us nicely to our second method, shifting the focus away from only setting proactive goals and instead focusing on reactive learning, growing from what life serves up.
Yes. And this requires acknowledging how narrowly we sometimes define what actually counts as growth. We tend to assume it only happens during moments of intense motivation, flying high or during periods of major life-altering trauma.
Right, the big stuff.
But the reality is, if you have any degree of responsibility in your life, whether it's for a pet, a child, an elderly relative, even just a budget almost every day serves up an opportunity for growth, simply due to the friction inherent in the mundane.
Mundane friction. Okay, give us a concrete example, something really relatable. What kind of low-stakes annoyance are we talking about here?
Okay, think about needing to deal with a tedious, annoying, maybe time-consuming administrative task, like a medical billing error you have to sort out.
Yes, been there.
Or a bureaucratic form that requires 3 phone calls to fix. Or maybe just a complicated return process for something you bought online. It's not a life-altering crisis, right?
No, but it feels like it sometimes. It generates enormous mental drag.
It really does. And the opportunity for growth here is simply handling it better than you usually would, maybe with a bit more measured patience, some strategic preparation, and crucially, less emotional fallout afterwards.
I think we've all been there, definitely. Where checking that one email felt like climbing a mountain because you knew it was that issue. My internal monologue is usually something like, why is this happening to me right now? How do we switch that script?
You switch it by reframing the moment. The powerful self-talk that came up in the research was something like this. Okay, this annoyance. This doesn't even reach the top 100 or probably even the top 500 of stressful things you've actually dealt with in your life.
Ah, perspective.
Exactly. That framing works almost immediately to reduce the perceived emotional size of the challenge. You're essentially practicing mental fortitude. You're growing your capacity for stress tolerance in a safe, contained environment.
Okay, but I need to push back a little here on the paradox you mentioned. When reserves are low, just trying to survive the day feels hard enough.
It does.
Why would trying to thrive, actively looking for growth in these minor moments, actually be easier? That sounds completely backward to me.
It does sound counterintuitive, I get that, but it's powerful. See, when you're operating in survival mode, you're treating that annoyance, the billing error, the long queue, as just a drain. And your energy level drops further because you perceive the world as kind of antagonistic.
Right, it feels like an attack.
Exactly. But when you deliberately switch to thriving mode, even just for that small task, you reframe that stressor as a practice opportunity. Yeah. You're choosing competence, agency, not resignation.
So you're investing maybe a tiny bit more focus up front into gaining a skill like patience, or figuring out who to call first and you get a return in the form of confidence, or just less frustration. Instead of letting the moment only deliver emotional fatigue.
That's it exactly. Seeking out these tiny opportunities for competence, ironically, can give you a small boost of competence-related energy you might not have found otherwise. You gain a sense of agency back. So I'd encourage you, the listener, maybe retroactively scan your past week. Can you find those small moments where you managed an annoyance, a frustration, or a minor error reasonably well? Spotting them afterwards teaches you how to spot them and maybe even utilize them in real time going forward.
That's a huge reframing of how to use that daily friction.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move to the third pillar. What happens when life throws a truly major wrench in the plans? You get seriously sick, a family member's in crisis, maybe a financial setback feels like it just blows up months of effort toward a goal. Responding to setbacks by going back to basics.
Yeah, this is such a classic frustration point because the impulse almost always is to try and pick up exactly where you left off.
Totally. If I was running 5 miles before I got the flu, my ego demands I run 5 miles the day I feel better.
Exactly. But when you've been genuinely knocked off course, whether by illness, travel, emotional exhaustion, whatever it is, the recommended response is gentle focus. Yeah. And this, well, it requires a certain maturity, doesn't it, to avoid immediately picking up that high-intensity routine, recognizing that going back to the foundational habits is actually the key.
Okay, I like the 5-year lens that was mentioned in the sources.
Yeah.
Can you walk us through that shift in perspective? Why does moving the finish line so far out help right now when we feel that immediate sense of failure?
The 5-year lens, it immediately shifts your perspective away from the perceived failure of the last month or even just the last week. It reminds you that this setback, however significant it feels now, is likely a blip, not the end of the entire journey.
Okay.
If you commit to the desired outcome in 5 years, whatever that might be, then running 2 miles today instead of the 5 you used to run isn't a failure. It's actually a strategic act of persistence. It changes the immediate goal from recovery of lost ground to long-term stabilization.
But for someone who feels like a total failure in that moment, that 5-year vision might still feel a bit abstract, a bit too far away. Can we break down the crucial first, say, 72 hours of returning to basics? What does that actually look like when you feel completely defeated? What even are these foundational habits?
That's vital, yes. The foundational habits are those absolute non-negotiables that support your entire system, regardless of your specific goal. We're talking about things like mandatory sleep hygiene, maybe just hitting a consistent bedtime, even if you lie awake for a bit.
Okay, basic sleep rules.
Minimum movement goals, which might just be a mandatory 15-minute walk outside, not a 5K run, just movement. Consistent hydration, just drinking enough water. Simple stuff.
Really basic.
These are the inputs that make your system stable enough to even process stress, let alone allow for high-level goal setting later on. It's about stabilizing the platform first.
So when you return to the basics like that, the value isn't necessarily that you're instantly performing well again. The value is that your base, your foundation, is becoming steadier each time you successfully manage to return.
Precisely. Growth isn't always up and to the right on a chart. Sometimes growth is measured by the stability and resilience of your foundation. Every time you successfully pull yourself back from a setback, even just to those basic habits, you strengthen the muscles required for resilience. And that base becomes easier, maybe just slightly easier, to return to next time. That is robust growth.
That's a really powerful reframing of consistency. Okay, finally, let's talk about a really low-pressure, almost stealth mode way to grow. Curiosity-driven self-experiments.
Yeah, this one's designed to be pretty much the complete antithesis of that typical social media post you see. You know, the I tried X for 100 days and Y happened transformation story.
Right, those big dramatic reveals.
Those posts are almost always anchored in transformation, optimization, and often really high pressure, which is exactly what people struggling with low energy or feeling overwhelmed do not need.
So instead, we're advocating for self-experiments anchored purely in curiosity. Tell us more about why that distinction is so powerful.
The distinction is subtle, maybe, but it's essential. When you approach something with just mild curiosity, like, I wonder what happens if I try this little thing. There's no real embedded failure state.
Oh, no pass-fail.
Exactly. You're simply observing. You're kind of detached from the outcome. But the moment you define it as a transformation goal, I must achieve Z, the pressure immediately returns.
Okay, give us that specific low-energy example you mentioned.
Right. The example we looked at was trying a topical retinoid for the skin. You're not necessarily doing it because of some huge optimization goal to look 10 years younger by next month. You're doing it simply because you are mildly curious about what small difference, if any, it might make over time.
The key here seems to be choosing something that has basically zero social pressure attached and really minimal cognitive load. Something that requires little to no mental energy on day one.
Absolutely. The retinoid example works because it's often just a 10-second step added to an existing evening routine, like brushing your teeth. You're not tracking reps or calories or doing deep journaling about it.
Right.
You choose something that feels completely insignificant on day 1, maybe even day 3. But then maybe by day 100, that tiny, insignificant act might reveal something interesting, perhaps just about your own ability to stick to a new, simple routine.
And this develops what you call the most crucial skill here, performing new habits in the background of life.
Yes. This is so important. If you only know how to make new habits a high priority, front and center in the foreground of your attention, well, you quickly run out of mental space and energy when life inevitably gets messy or demanding. Learning to integrate small, low cognitive load actions into the background where they just run almost automatically, like silent software that opens up so many more options for continuous low-friction growth, regardless of your current energy level.
Okay, so wrapping this all up, what does this really mean for our listener? I think the key takeaway is that growth doesn't require buying into that dominant model of self-improvement. You know, the perfectionism, the hustle culture.
Absolutely.
You do not have to be compulsively on top of your game, highly energized, and rigidly goal-focused all the time in order to grow.
We really need to fundamentally alter that common belief that growth can only be initiated by proactive, high-ambition goal setting. We have to realize and internalize that growth can actually be drawn from the very things that seem to suppress it.
Like the friction, the fatigue.
Yeah, the friction, the fatigue, the chaos, even the mundane tasks of daily life. By reframing them as these little practice opportunities, we can sometimes generate energy rather than just consuming it.
That feels genuinely liberating.
Yeah.
You don't have to wait until you magically have master's degree energy again to feel like you're actually moving forward.
Not at all.
So, for you, the listener, maybe consider one of the 4 alternative paths we talked about today. Smart flexibility, finding growth in mundane opportunities, going back to basics after a setback, or trying one of those curiosity-driven experiments. Ask yourself, what tiny, maybe background step can I take today or this week to start charting a personal culture of growth that actually works for me, using the energy I currently possess, rather than just chasing some cultural stereotype of what growth is supposed to look like?